Good morning, and welcome to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm glad you've made the connection and are with us today. I'm Laurie Fitz, your host, and the goal of our show is to explore a wide range of topics that challenge us to see ourselves, our community, and the world around us that gets us thinking, gets us talking, gets us perhaps making some revelations about the world around us, and perhaps inspired or challenged to do just a bit more because we've made the connection. So our topic today is specifically on data centers, but it's actually a broader discussion. It's about democracy and our role in knowing the issues. We have some great Minnesota DFL voices here. We have voices from Greater Minnesota and the Metro. And we're coming together, and I have thoroughly enjoyed getting ready for this show. We've had several show discussions before this show today, which has been great. And what I've loved most is that our conversations have been respectful. There's civil points of view. There's positive and opposing points of view in how we need to look at the data centers. But our conversation is based on research we've done. None of us are experts. None of us are specialists. But we believe that our civil responsibility is to do our own research, come to our opinions, and have civil conversations, and support our civic duty because eventually we're going to need to vote on these. And we need to be informed citizens as a part of democracy in making those decisions and voting for what we believe in. So in setting that stage, I want to introduce the folks that are with us today. Jonathon Rehlander is also my co-host today, and he is a Minnesota House candidate for 39A. And I am going to let Jonathon right now share with what is 39A, what does that encompass?
Well, thank you, Laurie. 39A encompasses all of Fridley, all of Spring Lake Park, all of Hilltop, and the northern part of Columbia Heights here in the cities.
Terrific. Johnnie Forrest, you're retired IUPAT Local 106, and you are the SD7 DFL Chair. Tell me what that means, Johnnie.
I'm heavily involved with retirees issues and the chair of Senate District 7 endorsing unit.
And tell me what that district encompasses.
Oh, it runs all the way from Aurora over to Deer River and Itasca County, all the way down to Aiken and almost Aiken and Aiken County, up to Embarrass and north of Chisholm. It takes about 2 hours to get across our district.
That's quite a district there, and I know you do a good job, and we're glad you're here today. Susan Herder is the secretary for SD 59, and she's also a student at Humphrey School. So tell me what that means.
Thank you, Laurie. It's so nice to be here. Yeah, I'm Susan. SD 59, SD stands for Senate District, and so that's the state senator. Our present state senator for SD 59 is Bobby Joe Champion. He would have been our lieutenant governor if we had won the last presidential election. It's North Minneapolis.
Oh, great. And Jack Carlson. Jack Carlson joins us as the Duluth Building and Construction Trades President. That's pretty straightforward, but tell us a little bit more, Jack.
Good morning, Laurie and everyone else. So my day-to-day with the Duluth Building Construction Trades, I represent over 17 local union crafts, ranging, from carpentry to elevator work to my daily as a business rep for Local 106 of the Painters Union.
And District 106, tell us what that is.
So Local 106 is my membership. They're the ones that make up Local 106. John was a union member of Local 106 as a painter and a glazer. I represent several different crafts, paint, drywall, glass, trade show, and they all make up my membership for Local 106. It's a big group of construction workers.
Well, we have a great gang here today to talk about construction as part of it. But also looking at all the issues around data centers. Jonathon, help us set the stage for looking at data centers.
Sure. So when we're talking about data centers, we're looking at these buildings that have gotten a lot of attention lately. We're talking about essentially structures of various sizes because they can be small, they can be very large. And they basically house thousands and thousands of servers which process and store information and are the lifeblood for the AI and the internet right now. And what we're seeing is of a lot of people it's come into a lot of controversy lately. Mm-hmm. And what we want to get into is, what are these things? What do they do? What are the benefits of the community? And what can we do to have an informed decision when it comes to whether we want them in our areas or not?
There are challenges. There are lots of opportunities that it presents as well as challenges. And being able to navigate the pros and cons, there we go. And also take a look at maybe some myths and misconceptions, I think, are going to be part of our conversation again today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're looking at how data centers support the growing needs of the internet and the AI. And there's a lot of things that we depend on for the internet. And sometimes we take those things for granted here when we have internet so easily accessible. But, Johnny, you've got some challenges getting onto the internet. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, up here, accessibility is part of it. We have people who live out on lakes and stuff. We have an older population who don't necessarily have laptops or access to laptops or affordability to laptops. And
I hear it takes like $200 a month for some folks to get onto be able to get on the internet. And some have had laptops when they work, but when they retired, don't have the laptops now.
Right, because they live out on the lake. They'd use their email addresses from work. Their spouses would use their email addresses, use their spouses' email addresses from work as well. And then now they're living on lakes. They're just not connected. And then we also have, like I said, we have an elderly population that do not even think a laptop is a necessity.
Well, what we've got is a clip that our co-producer, Rick Bernardo, brought to us, looking at the digital divide to help set the stage for us understanding what might be some challenges in looking at who has access and who does the internet serve, and how do we be respectful for the various needs that are out there.
From years of teaching cyber tech ethics courses at St. Mary's University of Minnesota, this is Rick Bernardo with a Moral Tech Minute. When we talk about data centers, it's in one larger context of what's known as a digital divide. There's a disparity in society between technology haves and have-nots, depending on such factors as your geographic location, for instance, urban or rural, your age, young or old, or your socioeconomic status, are you rich or poor? Many don't have access to the technology others have. The result is that technology have-nots can have less access to education, to tools for economic growth, and to participation in our democracy. Now, missing access to technology, hardware, software, and the internet has been called the Digital Divide 1.0. So what do you think Digital Divide 2.0 is about? Well, it's when we're missing the skills actually to use such technology. It'd be like even if everybody got a car, some never had a clue about how to start or drive it. The digital divide leaves many people as technology have-nots. This background highlights an ethical landscape about discussing data centers related to what is fair and what is good for all of us.
Susan, I know you had some questions about who does the data center best serve?
Thank you. Yes, Laurie. So, for instance, what Johnny was just saying, he takes 2 hours to drive across his district, but he needs to stay in touch with all those people, yet he doesn't have internet at home because it costs over $200 a month. Whereas me, in the middle of, I'm right near downtown Minneapolis, my internet is like $28 a month. So, and the interesting thing is, so we're talking about data centers. Data centers are built mostly in rural areas by rural people and owned by people who we never even meet because they're so rich.
And owned by, you mean the data center is going to be owned by like a Google or a
Meta?
Well, they're largely privately owned. So, yeah, it's companies like Meta, Google, et cetera, that are ones who are installing these. And we'll be getting into this, but then it involves a lot of company security and privacy and details that aren't necessarily available for folks.
How much data is needed, and how much data centers can support how much the energy is being taken up by our AI and other ways that we use the internet. We do have a couple clips from MIT that Jonathon
Technology
brought
Review,
to us.
yes.
And what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and just do it a bit at a time. And then we're going to talk about it. And I'd like to get everyone's thoughts on how much energy is required to run these systems. So let's do the first clip.
We've all heard that AI uses a tremendous amount of energy and that it produces a tremendous amount of carbon emissions as a result. But how much energy exactly? What happens when we query an AI chatbot or generate a video? And what happens as those queries pile up? To find out, let's start at the bottom and look at the impact of an individual prompt. Then we can work all the way up to a nationwide network of data centers. Companies like Google and OpenAI keep energy usage figures closely guarded, but by looking at open source models, we can make some informed estimates.
Asking a simple question to a small AI model might use the same amount of electricity as running a microwave for 8 seconds, not even long enough to reheat last night's dinner. But larger text models can use more energy than AI models that generate images.
That's a lot of energy.
It is. And it's growing.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we're seeing. Currently, right now, in Back to the Future, okay, yes. The big amount of energy that they needed to make the time machine work was 1.21 gigawatts, which is 1 million kilowatts. So when you're looking at your household appliances, you're talking about a few kilowatts to run the microwaves and so on. And what they're talking about is take that times 1 million. And when we're talking about data centers and the amount of energy they require, we're currently looking at 400 terawatt hours by 2030, which is 1 million gigawatts. So it's 1 million.
A million.
That's exactly right.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, we're talking about a huge amount of energy and power that's needed to meet the demand of what they're wanting to do with these queries. And each query has a carbon footprint, too.
And an environmental impact.
That's right.
And how much for what? I mean, how much energy do we need for what we can get on the internet, and how much does that impact? But I know, Jack, you're interested in what it could also provide. It could provide jobs. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So these data centers, we talked about these being in the rural areas, and for construction workers that live in these rural areas, whether it's, outside of the city of Duluth or if it's outside of Grand Rapids, we have workers that like to live out of the big metropolitan areas. And that work that would be coming to these towns and these local areas, that provides good paying union jobs for these individuals that could be working on these projects.
And you were talking earlier in our conversation, Jack, about when some of these larger facilities are built, you're talking about could be as many as 1,500 people that have a job building those things, and that could take about 7 years for the larger ones, right?
Absolutely. So a lot of these facilities in these data center, we're going to call them complexes, they have multiple buildings. There's going to be a couple of the big storage buildings. Some of them have like showers and office space in another building. There's going to be maintenance facilities where you're going to have, the plows for the parking lot and the equipment for the maintenance staff to go out and use.
Sure.
So these projects, they're not going to be just this one massive building, but they're going to be several other buildings that are going to take place over a period of time. And when it comes to starting the project, and by the time we get shovels in the ground through the first phase of building the first building, that could take 300, 400, 500 people on a project. And then that phase 2, where they're going to start building another storage facility for the components that would be in these data centers, that could take on to another 400 or 500 individuals. And when it's laid out, it's not starting a project to completion for the small phase, but they're stacking them up on top of each other. So once the first one may be halfway to 75% done, they're going to start working on the next one. And that takes several years to work through these complexes. And it could be 7 to 10 years with upwards of, 1,500 individuals on these sites.
How many? I'm going to go to Jonathon, and then I'm going to go to Susan. Jonathon, how many are we looking at right now in Minnesota are there, and what are we looking for as the potential in the future?
Right now in Minnesota, there are currently 74 data centers, but nationwide we're looking at 3,000. And what they're projecting for their needs, because it's expanding very, very quickly, what they're looking at by 2030 is having 165% more of these. So we're looking at over almost 8,000 data centers in the United States alone just by 2030.
I know you have some questions about building.
Yeah.
Go for it, Susan.
So, Jack, I'm really curious what your experiences of building the data centers is. When did you first start working on them? How many have you built? What?
I don't think that Jack has started to build them yet. I think he's worked on construction. Is that right, Jack? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Absolutely. So I've been in construction for over 20 years, and I have not worked on a data center. We have no data centers in northern Minnesota currently, but the building of a data center is just like building an Amazon warehouse or a Walmart supercenter or any other large warehouse style buildings, which all the members of the Duluth Building and Construction Trades Council, that's what they do for a living. They go to work. They're very specialized in what they do for that portion of the project, whether it's laborers, cement masons, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters. They all have a certain part of that project that they're skilled in. And that's how we build these buildings. Now, the data center stuff, I'm not experienced in actually what is inside the data centers. Right. That's, a lot of the tech type people will know more about that.
And I'm going to just jump in for a second here. And I think I know where Susan's going in that these are owned, as we talked about earlier, by Google and Meta. And there's some non-disclosure agreements as they go in that probably have to do with what is getting built in that and how it gets constructed. And I know you have some concerns about, not knowing exactly what some of this construction might entail. Am I on the right track with you, Susan?
Yeah, but I also was just interested in Jack sounds so knowledgeable. I mean, he's in our conversations, he's already told me way more than I realized. And I'm wondering, are you getting that information, Jack, from your colleagues in, like southern Minnesota where there have been built data centers? How do you tell me more about your experience? How do you know these things?
Well, when you have a big warehouse size building, there's going to be, and I'm not going to say it's a pretty standard cookie cutter style building for every data center versus, warehouses for Amazon or other large facilities. But the backbone and the base of the data centers themselves are all pretty standard. They're going to be, concrete tip up buildings. They're going to have bar joist ceilings. The buildings themselves are 100% normal construction work. What goes inside those buildings, you're going to have a lot of electricians working in there because there's a lot of components that do take electricity. But the facts and the information that I guess I can pick up from folks down in the metro where they are building these other data centers, we do converse and have conversations, but the manpower needs, the size of the buildings, that's the information that I get working with these data centers. But again, going back to the actual construction of it, it's very standard construction for us.
I know we're also going to be, in our next segment, sharing more about environmental impact. And what does that look like? What are the challenges of what does get utilized in those technology centers? What is needed? What we may have heard even in southern states that are needs that may not be the same needs that we have in Minnesota. So our complexity only goes on. Don't stop here. But wait, there's more. It's tough to navigate. But what I like most is having good conversation about it and figuring out how can we sort through all the issues that are part of creating these data centers and come up with, ideally, a DFL opinion sometime down the line, because I think this will be coming up in the caucuses. This will be something that's going to be, and the more that we all can keep being informed and bring our informed ideas to the caucus and be able to express it, I think the better our democracy is. So we are talking about data centers, but don't forget, we're also talking about democracy as well. We'll be right back, and this will continue. We're going to talk, continue about data centers. We'll get some more details. We'll hear a little bit more from the MIT on what to think about in terms of how much energy is needed. We'll also be talking about what's the environmental impact. All that and more in our next segment. Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. And today, we're talking about democracy, but we're focusing on data centers. It's an issue here in Minnesota, and we've got to think through a policy and a direction that we want to go with data centers. We've got various very rich organizations that want to come in and build them. They want to build them all over the state. That gives us opportunities, but it also creates some challenges that we need to talk through. So in doing so, we've got some great DFL folks here. I've got Jonathon Rehlander, who is the Minnesota House candidate for 39, which is, tell us again, Jonathon?
39A, yeah. It's in Fridley, Spring Lake Park, Hilltop, and the northern part of Columbia Heights.
We have Johnnie Forrest, who's retired IUPAT Local 106. He is also the SD7 DFL Chair and has a huge district that he works in. And tell us again the district that you support.
It's all the way from Aurora to Deer River in Itasca County, Aurora and St. Louis County, and Barris up north, all the way down to almost Aiken County. Aiken, the city of Aiken, and down by where Jack lives, in fact, Independence, and up north of Chisholm.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, Jack, I'm going to go right to you. Jack Carlson, Duluth Building and Construction Trades President. Tell us what that means.
Absolutely. So I represent 17 local craft unions in the Duluth area. They cover pretty much anyone from carpentry to elevator workers to electricians to painters.
And Johnny, of course, is a painter.
Yep.
And Susan Herder, secretary for SD59. She's also a student at the Humphrey School.
Hi, everybody.
And tell us again about SD59.
So that's North Minneapolis. SD stands for Senate District. So we have, I think it's 67, right, state senators who meet in St. Paul along with the reps. And Bobby Joe Champion is the senator for SD59.
Jonathon, we said at the end of the last segment that we were going to talk about some environmental issues. Help set the stage for us on that.
Well, when you think of data centers, these are the images that are typically talked about. You're talking about water usage. You're talking about the huge amount of electricity that they take up. You're talking about the potential ways that they are powered. And so we're looking at nuclear is one of the ones that's most interesting right now. And this actually has some fairly bipartisan support at the moment. What they're looking at doing is either reactivating nuclear sites that have been in use in the past, or they're talking about creating different nuclear facilities of different sizes to be the continuous power for these data centers. Because, again, we talked about how much energy they use. It requires a continuous, huge amount of electricity on a regular basis that's reliable. And so there's debate about what that impact means to the communities that they are being built in. And in Roanoke, Virginia is a great example. You've got a huge, huge facility that takes up city blocks. And it creates this noise that is pervasive. And it's right up against these residential areas. And it's one of the most heavily, densely populated data center sections in the entire country. And we're looking at seeing those being built now here in Minnesota.
I'm going to share a little bit of a detail that I found about some backlash in communities across the country that are having some challenges. Over $64 billion in U.S. data center projects have been blocked or delayed by community opposition. And the big concerns are noise, pollution, and grid strain. Johnnie, I know you had done some research, and I'd love to have you share what your thoughts are about the environmental concerns and what the needs are that may be different here in Minnesota that may be different from southern states.
Right. So in the southern states, the infrastructure is not near as solid as ours. So how much, energy loss is lost to a bad infrastructure system. And then also, we have containment wall to keep the noise down, reduce noise on the interstates and highways, once it's possible to do that. And then, these things cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and whatever they need to put in there to do the restrictions and to mediate some of this. And then the water usage, this is what I found interesting. They talk about this huge amount of water usage, and actually that's predicated on the amount of electricity. A lot of it is because most of the cooling water is recycled and reused, and then they also have a chemical way to recycle or to cool.
Right.
And you were mentioning something in one of our conversations that being in a cooler state may have an impact.
Yeah, I think Jack had said something about that, but it is cooler. Yeah, it doesn't cost as much. Initially down south, to cool everything, it takes such a large volume of water, a large volume of electricity. Up here, it should take way less because we have a cooler climate. Anybody who's been outside here lately knows that.
Yes.
Negative 17. Didn't I hear Jack say?
Yes.
Yeah. Laurie, I can jump in there just a little bit and kind of go off of what Johnnie was kind of describing. So a lot of the concerns that we have heard and have talked about is, we're going to talk about a lot of the water consumptions. Some of the, the data centers in the southern states where the climate is a lot warmer, they have like condensing units, and they have forced water to blow over these condensing units to pull the heat that these data centers create to cool their systems. It's kind of like the radiator on your car, except for they're misting water onto that radiator. In the northern climates, we're a much cooler climate up here. So we have the radiators and then the units that can cool this, but we're not misting the water onto these coolers. It's just the air that is just going right across them. So the water consumption is way, way, way down. And for a facility such as one that we've talked about in northern Minnesota here, it takes about 50,000 gallons of water to fill the closed loop cooling system, where there's pumps that'll kind of cool it. And like I said, it's very similar to the engine on your car, how it pumps the coolant through the radiator and the air cools it, and then it circulates it back into the engine.
Well, I think it's great that there's something good about our cold state. It's a good region for cooling, not needing the same spraying. You said something also about a car wash and how much it uses compared to what we might be looking at in a data center. And what I have here in my notes is that spraying a car wash will use more water in a week than a data center could use in a year. So that's kind of interesting fun fact to know and tell.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry, Laurie.
No, go ahead.
So the 50,000 gallons that these data centers could potentially use to fill up their system, the rest of it is going to be just general consumptions through your toilets, showers, stuff of that nature. And then I did pick up just a little bit of information on the car wash side of things, and just an average car wash for one single car can use up to 200 gallons per pass. So there's a lot of misnomers when it comes to the data centers and the water consumptions.
What about waste?
Well, that's the big concern.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're seeing is when it comes to nuclear, that we still don't have a solid answer on how that's going to be handled. And some of those aren't even designed to be online until about 2030. They take a long time to build, which means that in the meantime, we're looking at more of the fossil fuel production until those have a chance to be built, if they're approved, and what happens to the waste afterwards. Some of the mini ones that they're talking about are safer than what we've seen in the past, but again, we still need an answer on that. The other part of it is the carbon dioxide emissions. Now we're looking at output of 402.49 grams per kilowatt hour.
What does that mean?
So when we're talking about how much carbon dioxide emission is, to drive a car for an hour, it takes about 400. That is about the same amount of 400 grams of carbon dioxide emission. When we're talking about, again, we talked about the difference of kilowatt hours to gigawatt hours to terawatt hours. We're talking in terms of terawatt hours here, which is a million, like we said. And when we're talking about the usage now, in 2020 it was only 100 terawatt hours in 2020 for the United States. By 2030, that is estimated to be at 400. So 4 times the amount. So every time a search is entered, every time a image is created, everything like that, it takes that much effort to get this kind of output, and this creates these kind of emissions that we're talking about.
And 2030 sounds like a long time from now.
That's just
but
4
it's
years.
Not.
That's
it's
4 years away.
less than 4 years.
That is one presidential term, folks. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so that brings me back to who benefits. So we are all benefiting from AI for the most part. You know, there's some downsides for sure. We're still learning about it. But we are also becoming more dependent on it. And we are paying a lot more in electrical bills because of it.
And that's a large part of the privacy thing again. Companies are, again, privately owned. And so a lot of the information that we're talking about is not necessarily being shared with the public where these centers are going in.
And how much it could cost and continue to cost. We've talked about the non-disclosure agreements. And go for it.
Yes, so non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, they have good sides and downsides. Basically, as citizens, we want to know how our government is run, how our cities are run, and that kind of thing. So it's good to have that information. On the other hand, if you have too many people stirring the pot, it can slow everything down. So an appropriate use of NDAs is really good. But what is that?
And it's hard because there's some proprietary information that they say is important. However, Jonathon, I know you've got some challenges of what that means. You know, is it a cloak for other things that they keep from the community?
Right. Well, let's just dig into the non-disclosure agreement thing because you're never putting out or having somebody sign a non-disclosure agreement for something that's a positive. It's always about something that you don't want to share. And so when we're talking about NDAs, we're talking about how the proprietary information thing can be an overall cover or blanket over any information they don't want to share.
And I'll push back just a little bit. Sometimes a non-disclosure agreement is that I've got a special technology and I don't want anyone else to know it.
Granted.
And that that's my special, and I don't want someone to copy it because that's something that I've developed.
We're not talking about sharing company secrets here. What we're talking about is environmental impacts. What we're talking about is electrical needs. What we're talking about is the different ways the noise pollution that we talked about, all these kind of things. And it's not that if people have a balanced and informed decision that they wouldn't still want these things there. It's just the fact that when you cloak it in secrecy, when you don't disclose to the public what is coming in, or even that they've been approved, which we've seen in some areas, then it becomes a thing where people are going to assume the worst. And if it makes a lot more sense to be upfront and honest, and what happens is the public officials, the government officials who approve the licenses for these things, also have to sign these NDAs, and that limits what they can share with the public about what the impacts will be. Mm-hmm. And so there's got to be a balance between protecting company secrecy and legitimate government and legitimate company secrets, mm-hmm. and making sure that the public has an informed decision about what is happening to their community.
Johnny, I know you have some ideas on that too.
Yeah. You know, I've seen profiteering being done when companies have done stuff without non-disclosure agreements to initially start a project and stuff, or someone finds out the location, they goes in and buy it up as a way of opposition to the project or as a way to profiteer off the project.
Right.
And so there's got to be a little bit of limited use of it, and I understand what Jonathon is saying. But also there are people who I have seen, in fact, take advantage of public information to profiteer.
Right. And again, it's finding the balance, right? Johnny,
right.
It's about finding the way to protect those things, not prevent them from going in necessarily, but again, letting the public know what's happening.
So to me, it's about trade-offs. You know, every change that we make, you know, going from phones to cell phones to AI, all that is a big change for us. If we know what the trade-offs, there's always going to be a trade-off. You're going to lose something, and you're going to gain something. If we know what those are, then we are better able to make the choice that we want.
You one time gave me an example of how we feared something during a technology, and that technology was horse-driven carts.
Oh, yes.
Share that with us.
So I had a friend once who got involved in her very small city government, and there are national conventions to educate people like her. And she went to one, and she told me that there was...
Probably around the turn of the century.
Yes, around the turn of the century.
The last century, not the 20th, the
1900s.
Yes.
Before World War I,
yes.
Everybody was using horses for transportation. So, you know, you can breed horses and you get more horses, and that's great. And what do horses do? They create manure. And so there were a lot of horses and there was a lot of manure. So much manure they didn't know what to do with it. Became a major health issue, very bad for health. And all of these city people, the city officials did not know what to do with it. They couldn't figure out a good solution. And all of a sudden, cars. We got cars. Now,
and we had a trade-off with that.
Don't you know?
We still do, yes.
And we still do. But I love the point that sometimes when we're worried about one issue,
right,
the next technology creates another one for us, but then we almost forgot that was an issue at one point, and that was solved in one way, but it opens up what's the next trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so if we know what the trade-offs are, we can be prepared for the downside. So NDAs are a problem, but if they give us the right information, we can. It will be better for everybody.
And honestly, I think it would cut down on some of the protests and so on if people were given the information. I mean, you're always going to have extremists who are going to take it the worst way possible. However, if a public is given the facts and given an informed choice, generally they're going to make the right decision because they live there.
Right.
And these companies aren't.
Right.
Absolutely. And Jonathon, I'd like to jump in there a quick second, too, with the NDAs. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there is an appropriate time for an NDA to be in place, mm-hmm. but to go to where we talked about, like, you know, some of the AUR permitting processes, you know, the decibels that a lot of the folks are going to hear. The NDAs, I think, for the profiteering and the beginning stages where a lot of that information is just kind of starting to come to. But then there should be a good time where that NDA expires. So then all the information, if there is a potential project that comes to town where a lot of, the community members would like to hear about this, then I think that's where the NDA should stop. And then everything should be up and open for everybody to come to a city council meeting or a town board meeting to hear the information.
Exactly. Yep. There has to be a balance there.
100%.
And Johnny, I know that you've got some ideas about why it's important to be able to have the good jobs up in northern Minnesota as well. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, you got the good jobs, the 700 to 1,500 jobs. So you have all the outlying jobs that do it. The third or fourth person working at your Kentucky Fried Chicken or your restaurant or the hospitals. That's something, a really big issue up here where I live is, because our hospital is possibly on one of the lists with all the cuts that are made now.
Right.
And trying to have, figure out other revenue and stuff like that. And when you have that many people in there, plus their families are working in these places and stuff. So it builds a community.
And I know that we've talked about having it being built with large numbers, but running some of the data centers, it's more like 15 to 20 after that. But Jack, you brought up the point earlier that some of the folks that build these may go on to the next stage and can continue being work for maybe over a much longer period of time. If you want to share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, and this could just be like a hypothetical scenario where we do have a data center that is going to start, they're going to come to town, they're going to provide a large number of jobs, and we, with the local trades unions, we can bring in apprentices that could start on this project. Now, if they're going to start on the very front end of this project and they're going to work through the entirety of all the phases on one of these complexes for 7 to 10 years, that gets them through their apprenticeship program, and that gives them the ability to stay at home with their family. They can sleep in their own beds at nights, and that's very important to our members. Now, if there's another data center that could come down the road in 8 to 10 years from now, and they could continue to work onto that site, that could be another 7 to 10 years worth of work. And on average, most of our members are working 30 years, 60,000 hours. So if they could work on a couple of data center projects over their career, that means up to almost 15 years of their work that they're being performed could be local, where they wouldn't have to go to a North Dakota facility or down to Iowa. They get to be with their families, and that's important to us.
And we're going to leave it on that note for this segment. I'm running a little over, as usual, but we will come back, and we're going to continue our conversation and wrap up some of the key points for us to be thinking about when we're looking at data centers here in Minnesota. Thanks for being with us on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
We talked about
Back to Connections Radio Show, where we've been having a wonderful, lively conversation about democracy in terms of our civic duty and becoming informed. And we focused on looking at data centers. And I feel just blessed that we have got folks from the Metro and the greater Minnesota having a really good discussion about what do we need to think about. I love the idea of what are the trade-offs? How are we more informed about those trade-offs? How are we looking at maybe some of the myths and misconceptions? What are some new technologies that we need to think about? And we've done that with some terrific guests that I am going to introduce again so that everyone can know who's on our call today. We've got Jonathon. And Jonathon, tell us where you're from again.
I live in Fridley, Minnesota, northern part of the Twin City suburbs. I'm currently a candidate for Minnesota House of Representatives.
For Fridley, right? Fridley area?
Fridley, Spring Lake Park, Hilltop, and the northern part of Columbia Heights.
There we go. That's Jonathon Rehlander. Johnnie Forrest is retired IUPAT Local 106. He's also the SD7 DFL Chair, and I'm going to make you one more time tell us where that district is.
That district is in northern Minnesota, not far than northern Minnesota, but it's north of Duluth quite a ways, from Aurora to Deer River, from Embarrass down to right north of Aiken, and from Independence north of Chisholm. It's a big area.
It sure is. And Jack Carlson is the Duluth Building and Construction Trades President. Welcome, Jack. We're glad you're here, and we're glad you've given us your insight today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And we've got Susan Herder, who's the secretary for SD59 and is a Humphrey School student. And tell us again what SD59 stands for.
Senate District 59, that's North Minneapolis.
Terrific. Jonathan, this is our wrap-up time. We've got just a couple minutes.
Yeah. Well, I, again, want to put a bow on this by talking about benefits. Who benefits from this? And Susan, you had some thoughts about this.
Very much so. So AI is helping all of us. The cost, though, who is it benefiting the most? The people that benefit the most, in my opinion, we don't even see. We never meet them. The very billionaires. Whereas, yes, they are providing wonderful jobs for Jack's union people. I'm so glad that that's happening. It's helped building their communities. And are the owners of these data centers actually sharing enough?
Good question.
Well,
Susan, can I jump in there?
Please.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, a lot of the data centers that I have worked with, not on specifically, but some of the folks that have came to town to discuss these projects, the tax revenue for these areas, these local areas, is going to be astronomical, because these data centers are going to pay their fair share. They're going to pay commercial tax revenue, and the communities, the schools, are going to be able to take advantage of this.
I want to balance that out, if I could, Jack, and just not to dispute your point, but just to say, we're also giving tax breaks to some of these companies to build in these areas. And I think that it's good to have that tax base there, but it also depends on the benefits that are shared with the community. Like with the energy
and officials
centers.
This is a great conversation a minute
Right.
before we need to wrap up.
Right.
But however, I do want to that's part of our civic duty, right, is to be able to talk through what can be how can we ask for the support that can give to the community, and how does that get balanced out? What are the costs that maybe are hidden costs? And I have like 30 seconds for a wrap up.
Okay,
Jonathan, go for it.
Again, yeah. When we're talking about, share the information, make sure that the community is benefiting with these power sources and everything else. And just to put a final capper, I don't think Meta and Google really need tax breaks. I think they're doing just fine. They're going to be good. They're not going to be eating ramen. They're good. They don't need any extra incentives to build these things, because they're going to build them anyway.
And tell you what, we'll have another show that looks at the next
good.
step.
Yes.
How's that?
Yes.
A good cliffhanger for everyone.